back, America. Many of you know that Sir Andrew Roberts, Lord Roberts, a good friend of the program, and we love his books. He recommended to me Robert Hardman, whose brand new book, The Making of a King, King Charles III and the Modern Monarchy, has soared up bestseller list, is flying off shelves, which I find absolutely stunning, Robert. Good morning, welcome. Because Charles was referred to as by David Barry as Charles the Uncomfortable. He's not really much of a winner in the United States. Are you surprised by how well your book is done?
Well, I always think that, whenever anyone sort of moves up to the top slot, whether it's president, king, or captain of the football team, there is a new kind of aura about them. And, he is taking over this extraordinary throne at a historic time. His mother broke every record in the book. He's the longest serving heir to the throne we've ever had. So I think there is renewed interest in him and the sort of king he's going to be.
Now, I was out walking with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt last night, who is a royalist and a monarchist, and I am sort of too. And we were talking about what I should ask you. And we both have the same question. Is there any chance that the new king will call up his son, Harry, and say, Harry, knock this off, come back to England, rejoin the firm, bring your wife, and let's patch this up because actually it's not good for you, it's not good for me, it's not good for the United Kingdom. Could that happen?
Well, I think everyone would agree on your last point. I don't think it's going to happen like that. I think what we will see is over time a kind of normalizing of a new post-rapprochement relationship, if you like. I mean, I can't see any situation where Harry and Meghan come back into the royal fold as sort of what we might call working members of the family. But I do think, give it time. We will see, we'll see them coming over for private events. There'll be a little bit more sort of thawing. But I mean, at the moment, it's still pretty raw. It's only a year since Harry's extraordinary book Spare came out. I mean, the most remarkable royal memoir, frankly, in history. It's as well as patching things up with his father, Harry's got to patch things up with his brother. And I think that's going to be a harder deal.
Harry has run the last 3 years worse than George III ran the war with America. I mean, every choice he's made has been a bad one. But does Charles understand that? I mean, does he have a father's sympathy for a son who just screwed everything up?
Yeah, he does. He's not vengeful. There isn't the sort of sense of a feud here. I mean, Charles is very much kind of big tent. It's like, well, let's just try and include everybody. It's not you are now cast into outer darkness for breaking the rules, Harry. That Harry said, he's waiting for an apology. I think that could be quite hard to come by. I think everyone's probably waiting for apologies all around. I think much better just to say, look, what's done is done. How do we move this forwards? I mean, let's not forget, there are two grandchildren in this who King Charles would love to see. He'd love to see more of them. He loves his UK-based grandchildren. He sees them all the time because they live in the park at Windsor. I think we'll probably start by seeing maybe the odd sort of summer visit back to the Highlands of Scotland, away from the cameras and things progress.
Robert, do you think they've got money problems, though? Doesn't Harry and Meghan, they have a lifestyle that is extraordinarily expensive, and nothing they do beyond selling of Spare makes any money. Aren't they going to run out of money?
Well, certainly as an author, I mean, you look at the sales figures for Spare, I think they're okay for a while. I mean, it was one of the fastest selling books of all time. Let's not forget, Harry inherited some money from his late great-grandmother, the Queen Mother. He inherited money from the Queen. He inherited a lot of money, actually, from both he and William inherited from Diana. So there's quite a lot there in the trust fund, if you like.
All right.
I don't know what Meghan's finance.
Let's talk about Charles.
There's enough there now.
Is Charles, in your view, very smart, somewhat dull, or dumb as a desk?
I think very smart. He's probably the most intellectual monarch we've had. You mentioned George III. Things didn't go too well in the War of Independence, but George III was a thinker, a reader,
yes.
Incredible astronomer, actually, very musical. Those are all attributes I can see in Charles. So he's no fool. I think he has good instincts. We were all wondering what sort of a king he was going to be. And there was a lot of speculation because he never told us. We just simply didn't know because there was no briefing. He wasn't even telling his staff. He certainly wasn't telling government ministers. So it's all been a bit of a steep learning curve, but he kind of gripped it from day one, actually. And I think so far, there have been no great crises, or certainly none of his own making. There's nothing that he's done that you could fault him for. Of course, there's been the Harry issue, the Andrew issue, but his responses, I think, have been pretty much the right ones.
Robert Hardman's new book is The Making of a King. It's about Charles III. He's going to come back and talk with me off air, and then we're going to put it on the podcast. But I want you, if you're interested in this, it has got great reviews. And when Andrew Roberts says a writer knows his stuff, you trust Andrew Roberts. Lord Roberts actually probably the finest historian at work today and the most admired anywhere in the United Kingdom, and I think in the United States. And so when he compliments The Making of a King, King Charles III and the modern monarchy, that suggests go and get it. I'll be back after this. It'll all be on the podcast today, The Universe. Stay tuned to the Salem News Channel. Stay tuned to this radio station. And I'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Show. Welcome back, America. Robert Hardman is my guest. He is the author of A Look, The Making of a King, King Charles III and the Modern Monarchy. Robert, the Washington Post, for whom I work, did a review of your book that said it is an impressive account of recent events. It's also decidedly pro-establishment. I know Autumn Brewington, who wrote it. Hey, it's pretty hard to get a great review out of the Post, and you got a great review out of the Post. Has that generally been the reaction to the book?
Well, it's a very generous and fair review by Autumn. It's had very good reviews here in the UK, I'm pleased to say. Of course, there have been some critical ones. That goes with the territory. I mean, this is not everyone by any means believes in the principle of hereditary monarchy. I've been called a eunuch, I think, by one left-wing magazine, and it's taken a bit of a kicking here and there. But overall, it's riding high. It's a number
I wish any book I had written had taken that kind of a kicking because it's selling like hotcakes. Now, what I really want to know is that Charles has given me the impression, and evidently I'm ill-informed, of being kind of out there, the green stuff, the stuff that's three generations away and worrying about the world, changing the name of the monarchy to defender of all faith, not defender of the faith. It's just kind of, I don't even know what the word is, not serious. Am I wrong? Is he a serious man?
He's a very serious man. Perhaps sometimes too serious. I mean, he was certainly ahead of his time with a lot of this stuff. You talk about the kind of green agenda. I mean, back in the 80s, the 90s, pretty much every cartoon of Charles would normally involve him sort of speaking to a tree or a plant.
Yes.
I mean, he really did speak to trees and plants. He still does. I've seen him do it. When he plants a tree, he will shake the tree by a leaf and say, "Good luck, tree." Now, in years gone by, people thought the guy's a bit, as he said, a bit sort of, that's eccentric, should we say.
That's it. That's the word.
Now it's kind of green. It's become the norm. I mean, I was at the COP summit in here in Britain a couple of years ago, and the world descended, and they were all treating him like the prophet whose prophecies had come true. I watched Joe Biden give him a hug and say, "If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here." I mean, there is a sense that a lot of this, his concerns about climate change, all those sort of things, that they're not kooky anymore. They are the mainstream.
It's not kooky to be in favor of climate change. What I find unusual about the king, and tell me if I'm wrong, please, is that he doesn't engage in conversations about the disputes, because there's no dispute about, well, I guess there is a dispute, but it's silly. The climate is changing. It's getting warmer. What to do about it is a vast field, and it usually begins with, in my book, nuclear energy, build as many plants as possible. I've never seen him engage with a critic of the green agenda or the Paris Accords. Has he ever sat down with a critic and had sort of a civilized conversation with him about it?
Yeah, I mean, he'll have sort of private conversations, but as a royal, generally, this is before he was king. You've got to be careful how you frame this, because you have to stay above politics. And what he's always done is move, certainly with the sort of if you like, with a sort of broad consensus across the political spectrum. I mean, yes, there'll be outliers on both sides of the argument with whom he won't agree, and he won't engage in public debate. He's not there to do public debate, but all the sort of discussions he has on this stuff, and he does like kind of big conferences. He likes sort of big round tables and long, open-ended discussions. There'll be elements of disagreement there, but it's not really his role to sort of start picking fights. It's to convene. He sees it as a kind of convening power. You get people together, you get them around a table, you let them do the sort of hardball. But overall, his general sort of line of attack, if you like, has been one that is the broad consensus. But he has put it out there. And other royal in a way that royals wouldn't have done in the past.
Now, talk to me about the change from defender of the faith to defender of all faith. Very significant in my view, but not much remarked upon. What did you think of that?
Well, he was careful not to. He hasn't changed the official title. I mean, that was sort of laid down. That was given by the Pope to the Tudors, in fact, and that hasn't changed. It's really a sort of change of aspiration rather than classification. So that in his coronation oath, for example, they inserted a sort of prayer at the start where he essentially acknowledges that he wants to not just preserve the Church of England, but to respect and preserve the rights of all faiths to practice. It's a sort of it's not that different to what Elizabeth II said, actually, in a speech when she was marking her 60th anniversary, her Diamond Jubilee. She talked about the Church of England as sort of providing a safe space for all faiths. It's not something, it's certainly not a historic role. I mean, if you look back through history, I mean, the Church of England and the monarchy has often been pretty horrible to other faiths, other religions. This is quite a new thing. But I think it's sort of all part of a piece with the sort of Britain that Charles sees today.
This is what
you look at that.
It is of all a piece. Is he a man of Christian faith? Do you think he's actually a believing Christian?
Yeah, he's very much a deep-rooted, profound Anglican, but he has a strong sense of the spiritual. And an appreciation of the mystical. I mean, certainly you look at some of the things he's done, like go on retreats to Greek Orthodox monasteries. I mean, that's quite sort of extreme. I mean, you wouldn't have seen Elizabeth II doing that. He's very interested in other faiths, but at heart, he is he's a communicant with the Church of England. He goes to church every Sunday. He doesn't. It's not in a showy way. He's actually got his own little chapel he's built in his garden of his home at Highgrove, which I've seen. He had it consecrated by a bishop, and it's where he goes and sort of thinks. He's, again, in the past, this would have been seen as sort of eccentric to the point of sort of almost, what's he doing, and yet it's just what we know of him. We expect of him. He's deeply interested in other faiths as well as
I'm interested. I'm reassured by that, actually, because when I usually have a Brit on, it's usually Richard Dawkins or the late Christopher Hitchens was almost a weekly guest for many, many years. And of course, they were not exactly fans of Christendom. And it's one of Charles's big jobs. Let me conclude by asking you this. Charles is how old, Robert?
He's 75. 75 last November.
Do you think he has... We have Pope Benedict who abdicated, and we have Francis who hasn't, and we had Elizabeth who wouldn't, and we have Charles who might. What do you think?
I don't think he will unless, unless sort of some sort of mental incapacity kicks in. But even if that happens, we have mechanisms here. We have a thing called the Regency Act, which actually applied to George III when he had a sort of prolonged bouts of mental incapacity. That's what we do here. We don't go for abdication. It caused so much trouble when Edward VIII did it. It's regarded as a sort of dirty word. We don't want to go down that route again. So if something kicks in, if he really can't handle it, then there's a sort of wise panel of the Prime Minister, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, various people. They get together and they appoint a regent. And that the regent can do most things, but not everything. And then you just.
But what I was, he spent the best part of his life waiting. And he's in fine mental shape right now. I was just wondering if that affected his view of how it might benefit William to start earlier than he did.
Well, William, I don't think is any great hurry to do that. But it's been very much. I mean, it's a very good point, Hugh, because it's been on all our lips for the last few weeks. Because obviously, the Queen of Denmark abdicated just a few days ago, and she told the world. She told me, in fact, when I interviewed her a few years ago, she was adamant. She said, "No, you're in this job for life. You don't abdicate. You do it all the way." And then finally, she just decided, I think partly for health reasons and partly because life moves on, life changes, she decided that was something she should do. She should give the Crown Prince a go. So, never say never with the royals. But
let me close with this. They're the royals for a lot of countries. For example, Canada, where my in-laws are from, they're the royals for many, many different countries. Does anybody want to dump them? Because I can't imagine wanting. I think they've got it right. I think they've figured it out, and they've made the transition to modernity. And Elizabeth gets a lot of credit for that. But does any of the Commonwealth want her out or want him out?
Yeah, well, of the 56 now members of the Commonwealth, 14 have him as their head of state, and they include Australia and Canada. There are quite strong noises, particularly in the Caribbean, where countries like Jamaica, and some of the other realms there, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they're all talking about having referenda to get rid of the monarchy. But there's no huge popular groundswell because it's just human nature. There aren't many people around the world who say, you know what we need? We need more politicians. If you've got a head of state who's head of the armed forces, he's head of the judiciary, he's head of the civil service, you can't tamper with him, you can't bribe him. He might represent a sort of old white imperial family who live many miles away, but it does bring certain benefits, and one of them is that the bad guys find it very hard to get their hands on the levers of power. So
there's a lot of benefit to having a head of state, and I think we see that with President Herzog and with the King. One bonus question, inside baseball, Robert. Who is his inner circle? Who are the names that we'll never see in the American press with whom he consults and relies upon to guide his daily conversation schedule and strategery?
Well, the key player is Queen Camilla. She is the key to everything. Family aside, he has people like Richard Charters, former Bishop of London, old university friend of his. He's very close to him, particularly on sort of spiritual matters. In the world of the arts, people like Stephen Fry, environmentalists like Jonathan Porritt. He has around the world, actually, sort of writers, musicians. Lord Lloyd Webber, Andrew Lloyd Webber, is someone he talks to a lot about music. So he's a cultured man. But I think now he's king. He appreciates that it's easy when you're a prince to have a sort of court of people with particularly strong ideas. When you're king, you've got to embrace everything. So he's suddenly got to like football. He's never liked football, but he's got to like it now. He's got to sort of sit there and tap his feet through pop songs he hates because you're monarch. That's what you have to do.
There's a job. Robert Hardman, congratulations on The Making of a King in bookstores now in every airport in America. Anyone going anywhere will see this, and they'll find out some fascinating details about Charles III. David Barry calls him Charles the Uncomfortable, maybe unfairly, but it's The Making of a King. Thank you, Robert. I appreciated the conversation.
It's been great fun. Thanks, Hugh.
Bye-bye.